You know, I'm not really looking forward to this comment section, and you should all know why. But I guess it is what it is. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's finally happening. After hundreds, and I kid you not, hundreds upon hundreds of suggestions and requests and close borderline begging in the comments for me to check out Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, and after one of my homies telling me that if I don't check out Jojo's, they're basically gonna show me why having kneecaps is a privilege and not a right, I decided why not. I'm gonna check out Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, and I read parts 1 through 7. Now, before we get into that, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And if you are new to the channel, again, make sure to turn on the bell notifications. That way you're notified when a new video pops up on some of your favorite anime, manga, or whatever content. And without further ado, cue the intro. Now, when it comes to Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, it's a very odd thing to talk about, considering how many times I feel like it's not put into its correct context, being that Jojo's came out in the 80s and some of the parts in 90s, early 2000s, and honestly, it's extremely ahead of its time, referring to the earlier parts. And that dynamic of Jojo's having parts instead of actual arcs that follow one after another is a little bit tricky, considering that these parts really do serve as their own individual story, and the only thing that connects each part is legacies, bloodlines, names. Therefore, whatever progression you have or growth that you have of a protagonist won't last as long as maybe in other mangas. However, one of the benefits of Jojo's having these parts is that they do cut off the possibility of these characters becoming old, redundant, and kind of becoming irrelevant, as we do see in many other things within the shonen demographic. Here, I'm really referring to the side characters and how at times what is a frustration when it comes to the shonen demographic or genre pretty much is that the side characters, they fall so far behind the main characters that they become fully irrelevant. And within Jojo's, I don't think you suffer that issue too much, considering the fact that, well, the parts end and it's not one long story. It's all these individual stories that again connect through bloodlines, legacies, etc, etc, etc. I definitely think Jojo's biggest strength would have to be its versatility. Again, having these different parts, having these different protagonists, that you can basically choose who's your favorite, as well as which part you think is your favorite, and which Jojo villain is your favorite, and then when it comes to the stands, which stand is your favorite. Now, I'm not really going to get into that because I've heard that that likes to cause pandemonium and war within the Jojo's fanbase, but I'm gonna run through it really quickly. My favorite part is definitely tied between parts 4 and 7. My favorite Jojo protagonist would definitely have to be Johnny or Jotaro. My favorite stands is in between Killer Queen and D4C. But when it comes to these overall things, I definitely think discussing Jojo's, at times people make a hard distinction on what their preference is versus what's actually better. For instance, I like part 1 a lot more than part 6. However, I wouldn't go as far as to say part 1 is better than part 6, because I just don't think it is. One of the other things I really do want to give Jojo's credit for is its amazing creativity when it comes to its fights. Now, again, I think a lot of the fights do kind of boil down to preference based off of what ability you thought was cool, what ability you thought was whack, but I will say that most of the main antagonists within Jojo's are all phenomenal. Some better than others, but I think overall the board, Jojo's has a very strong list of main antagonists as well as minor antagonists, where you can kind of pick out of your bunch which one's your favorite. Now, I'm not a big scaler or debater when it comes to that kind of stuff, but I will say Jojo's power system is a very intriguing one. However, it's also extremely confusing, which if you're willing to read through that and you have somebody who can explain it to you, fine. But as someone who's trying to get into Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, I will warn you there are a lot of things that might strike you as confusing, so I would definitely suggest having a friend or a homie who doesn't necessarily spoil it for you, but if you get stuck on a part and you just need to reread it and you're not getting it, kind of like with what ends up happening sorta in part 5 and in part 7, then again, I definitely suggest you seek some guidance. Just kind of like an FYI heads up, that way the experience for Jojo's is a lot more smooth. Now, when it comes to the protagonists of Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, there are definitely some better than others, but I definitely do feel like overall in the parts, the standout characters tend to be the antagonist. I feel like the antagonists overall throughout the Jojo parts, or at least the main antagonists, have somewhat of a consistency in terms of quality. When it comes to the protagonist, at times one of my biggest qualms, especially in part 4, is that the main protagonist kind of gets outdone by a minor character, and yes, I'm talking about Koichi. You cannot tell me that Mr. Teen Gohan with the cell stand wasn't putting in more work than Josuke. I don't care what anyone says. Josuke's cool, but Koichi was the main guy in my heart. That I don't want to hear it. Case closed. Moving on. I guess I'm about to take the wrath of the Josuke fanboys and fangirls. Woo, can't wait for it. But other than maybe my opinion on that, I do believe that JoJo's, again, big strength is the fact that you can decide which part you like. I definitely think there are some parts that are just way better in quality than others. Again, parts 4, I would say 5 was really good. Part 6 is quality, but it definitely turns off a lot of people, and I perfectly understand why. I'm not going to get into it, just a little heads up. And part 7 is definitely the best part by far. Part 7 is phenomenal, and it was kind of what pushed JoJo's from low top 10 to kind of mid top 10 on my list. Currently, JoJo's is sitting at my number 6 spot. Something also that was really impressive about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure that you notice early on is that it's willing to do what at times other shonens don't do, and that's kill off characters. Listen, just quick FYI heads up, because you need it when getting into JoJo's. If you are somebody who loves dogs and you have a dog as a pet, you might want to refrain from reading JoJo's. I'm just saying. But seriously, JoJo's is willing to kill literally anybody within its series, and that's great because it keeps this feeling of danger that's very needed within JoJo's oftentimes repetitive villain of the week formula. And that's going to be one of the criticisms I give about JoJo's really quickly. I know, right? Criticizing JoJo's. Wow, I know, it's basically asking for death, but I have to do it. Unless you're really into the protagonist within the said part, unless you're really into waiting for whoever the main antagonist is, unless you're somebody who's a manga reviewer and literally has to sit through this in order to get to the good stuff, the earlier segments of certain JoJo parts might turn you off greatly, as it almost did with me, because you're reading this and it's being hyped up so much, and you're in this early moment within the part and you just fought a villain, beat him, fought a new villain, beat him, fought another villain, beat him, and you're like, okay, I've seen this already like 15 times before. Come on. Like I said earlier, some of these fights are great because they have different versatilities, different abilities, so the abilities themselves do not get repetitive. However, the formula at times can be repetitive. For instance, I think in part 7 they fixed this issue by having a kind of different dynamic where it's a race against time, and so part 7 definitely does fix that. However, it's in every single JoJo part. It's this villain of the week formula that, again, unless you're an extremely persistent person or you're somebody who likes to finish reading stuff, you might consider dropping JoJo's. However, I do implore you to not drop it because, again, the great stuff that kind of defines the overall parts happens in the end. The only other issues that I could see other people having with JoJo's, real quick before I get into my own criticisms, is at times the aesthetic of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and I can explain that kind of easily. These are extremely manly men, especially in the earlier parts, who just dress flamboyantly, and that's kind of the case in every single part. These are extremely flamboyant men, but they could probably pull any girl they wanted in real life. Alright, homie, it's not that deep. However, I'm pretty sure overall than just the fashion, I will admit at times the dialogue, especially early on, can come off as extremely cringe and corny. It is a little bit funny, and it's made better within the anime. I did see parts 1 and 2 through the anime, and it's made better through the great voice acting and whatnot. But my goodness, sometimes reading the lines in JoJo's, I would be reading it there in the Discord with the homies, and we'd all be chilling in a VC. I'd be reading it, and I would just be dying of laughter at what I was reading. But it does make it a fun and entertaining read, I will give it that. Now, before I do get on any further with the criticisms, I do need to state that I will be doing an individual review on each part on the second channel, so make sure you go subscribe over there. I'll be leaving the link in the description below. But this next issue that I have with JoJo's is kind of a 2-for-1. And it's the overall fact that at times it seems like certain things are really pulled out of nowhere, either when it comes to a certain character having a connection with a character in a past part, or when it comes to this character unlocking a new ability. It just all seems to be really convenient, and things that I really wish would have some build up or at least some hinting at before, and it's just those minor details that I think would really elevate JoJo's quality overall and have a little more connection to each part. And let me give an example real quick, but before I do so, this is going to be a slight spoiler if you haven't gotten into JoJo, so I suggest you click off of the video. One of the worst things about trying to get into JoJo's is having literally everything spoiled for you through the memes and whatnot, so I'll try my best not to do that. Okay, so basically the example I want to give is there's the main antagonist in part 6, and he has this connection with Dio. And look, although I understand some people like how they added this dynamic to Dio, and for me it just felt extremely unnatural because this wasn't the Dio I was accustomed to, and Dio having such a close ally and friend, somebody who would play a major role in one of the future parts, never really being hinted at in the earlier parts, is something that really struck me and stood out to me, and it's one of the things we do see within JoJo's at times. Again, me using that one as an example, is there are oftentimes things that are brought up or that happen that I really wish would be hinted at a little earlier. That way when you read it and you see it in retrospect, you really see the writer kind of thought ahead and planned things fully out, instead of, okay, I have this villain, what am I going to do to beat him, or what am I going to do for this part? Again, it's not really a huge knock, but it's kind of like a minor nitpick. But then again, when it comes to some of the greater mangas, that's all you can really do is nitpick minor things. But lastly, when it comes to JoJo's, definitely it's stronger and better parts tend to have more of a seinen tone to them. And I will say, I really did enjoy reading JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Thank you so much for pestering me to get into it. However, I do not think it's perfect, and there are a few things that I do like more than JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and there are a few reasons as to why I can perfectly understand people not wanting to get into it, whether it be the anime, manga itself, or the fan base and culture surrounding JoJo's. However, JoJo's is definitely something that I would suggest to somebody who hasn't read it. I wouldn't really bother them about it though. I'd be like, hey man, yeah, I like JoJo's, I think it's really good, it's in my top 10, you should check it out if you want to. But I'd have like 4 or 5 things I would suggest before it, and depending on the person who I'm talking to, I might recommend a few more things before JoJo's. Regardless, I do give JoJo's Bizarre Adventure my seal of approval. Again, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on the bell notifications, you know, all of the good stuff. It's great to be back. This video better not get copyright striked. I'm going to leave disclaimers all over the place. And as always, this has been The Masked Man. Hope everyone has a blessed rest of the day, and peace.